Welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line. I am Rebekah Olson, your host and CEO of the MACPA. Today, we're going to talk about the audit, right? The reserved service of the CPA profession. And the audit's always been about trust, right, at its core. It's what gives confidence to investors, boards, and the public, of course, our middle name as CPAs. And right now, in a lot of ways, we are living in a culture and an environment that is void of trust, right? And on top of that, and honestly, sometimes resulting from that environment, regulatory expectations are evolving and changing. Technology, especially AI, is questioning and threatening that trust in some ways, depending on who you're talking to, right? And talent pressures are certainly something that we're seeing reshape firm culture and capacity, right? And what the business model looks like. So a lot going on. And that's why I am so excited to be joined by Dennis McGowan, CPA, CAQ, so the Center of Audit Quality's Vice President of Professional Practice and Anti-Fraud Initiatives, and Matt Schell. Matt is the managing partner of Crowe's national office and an MACPA board member. So welcome, Dennis and Matt. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rebecca. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Really excited. So I know Matt knows this, but Dennis, this might be new to you. So MACPA, we start every meeting with a bit of good news, kind of starting out with that positive focus. So I'll go to Matt first, since he knows what to expect, since he's been part of our board meetings. But what's a piece of good news, professional, personal, whatever, that we can celebrate with you today, Matt?
So today it is March. Okay.
It is March. We
And
made it.
it's one of my favorite months. Second only to October, which is my love of fall and Halloween. But
Mm.
today is my birthday. And my son's birthday is coming up in a week. And, March is one of my favorites because we have spring forward. The weather starts to turn. We get daffodils, even a little bit of March Madness basketball, college basketball. And I know this is going to be the part that gets a couple of eye rolls, but we get a lot of high quality audit work done and filed to meet deadlines in March. And then we can celebrate,
You
right?
can't ask for a
So,
better month.
so March is
I
a
love
great month. And today, thank you very much.
busy month, sounds like it, but fun and a lot of celebrating. Happy birthday.
Thanks.
That is really awesome. You're spending your birthday talking to me and Dennis about audit and the future of audit. Like, I can't imagine what a better gift that we could give you.
I know. Couldn't agree more, Rebecca. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Happy
So
birthday,
Dennis, how about
Matt.
you? What's
Well,
your good news?
I'm gonna steal it from you, Matt. But so March is one of my favorite months for a very similar reason. My
Yeah.
birthday is tomorrow. So
What? How is this possible? This is amazing.
this is the birthday podcast, apparently.
Apparently, that's so awesome.
So,
I
but
I
I'm
love
like,
that.
Matt, I don't work on my birthday. So I'm headed to California tomorrow to go
Ooh.
wine tasting in Sonoma.
Oh my
Um,
goodness, Dennis, you are
so
making us all very jealous. That sounds
I
amazing.
can't
I'm
wait to
very
be doing
excited for you.
that.
Yes. And I hope you have some dry, warmer weather there, um,
Yes,
to do
hopefully.
all that wine tasting. That's awesome. Well, unfortunately, we gotta get into the meat of the talk, because 'cause I'd love to hear more about wine country, and birthday celebrations, but we wanna talk a little bit about the audit, right, and its future. And so I think it was last month, CAQ came out with its 2026 profession outlook. And public company audits in particular remain, foundational to trust in our capital markets, right? But the environment that we're all living in, and particularly the business environment, is rapidly changing and evolving. So I want to ask this question of both of you, but Dennis, I'll start with you. When you think of 2026, and I know we're now like 3 months in, uh, what are the top priorities that you're seeing, for the audit profession this year?
Sure, it's a great question, and I couldn't agree with you more that we're really sitting at a time of a lot of change on the horizon, whether that be from the regulatory environment or technology, which I know are things we're gonna get into. But if your listeners have ever visited the CAQ's website, they may have seen a line: "Audit creates trust, trust builds confidence, confidence powers markets." And so I think in times of uncertainty, in times of certainty, trust is foundational to
Absolutely.
our markets, and auditors are in the business of trust. So I think in disruptive times, trust and the role of auditors is even more important. I think that the regulatory environment, we're certainly going to see that continue to evolve. I do think, and I think we say this in our profession outlook for 2026, the goal shouldn't be change for the sake of change,
Mm,
but like, what is the right change? What is it that stakeholders in the financial reporting ecosystem are seeking, and how does audit kind of meet those needs? And also too, how can we minimize uncertainties in the future? So when I think about change, I'm looking for change that's going to help kind of stabilize maybe, period of uncertainty, and really position the audit as something that can really bring trust to our capital markets. And I think that certainly too, a regulatory environment that's responsive to the needs of all different stakeholders, firms and companies of all different sizes, a regulatory solution that makes sense for a mega cap company, audit by a really big audit firm, may not, that same regulatory response may not make sense for a medium or small size firm
right.
auditing a small cap company. So I think our regulatory responses to needs in the markets need to be responsive to all the different stakeholders in the ecosystem. So maybe that's, and I'd say probably the regulatory environment is certainly an area that needs to be a priority. I'd say the other would be technology. And so what does our profession look like in the future? We're hearing all these great things that AI can do. I know we're gonna get into that a little bit later, but I do think at its core, this is a people profession. And so how do we evolve the profession to continue to bring to bear kind of our competencies, while also embracing innovation to really set the profession up for the future. So maybe I'll pause there and let Matt weigh in.
Yeah, Matt, same question from, the inside the firm perspective, the practitioner, what are you seeing as those top priorities?
Yeah. So again, I mean, Crowe, I lead our national office. So, I'm kind of coming at this with a lens of, firm execution. And I
Yeah,
think, the priorities are kind of the same. Obviously, trust and audit quality are foundational. Why are they foundational? Because I think, quality and trust is what drives efficient like markets and efficient capital formation. It's kind of our job, and it should mean something when the audit's complete and you've got the unqualified opinion. I think with that, a lot of firms are very focused right now on a culture of doing the right thing and implementing quality control systems, and the QM standards went into effect for AICPA internationally. We've a lot of us have put in the international standards over the last 3-4 years. And I think even with those, you need audit execution. Audits are done by humans, you know, and at the end of the day, that execution needs to align with all of those other items. And so, I'd agree with Dennis on some of the other items like, regulatory stability, back to the basics, I think obviously it's something that everyone is super focused on as priorities. And, but I think we can't move forward and think about all of that without just the advent of new technology and try to think about, okay, so we're in a world where AI is no longer optional, right? It's
right.
kind of table stake. Um, differentiation isn't just like a tool operate like adoption or, how do you execute that task faster, but it's really getting to a level where, you can scale that with governance and, empowering people to make better judgments, more informed judgments. Right. And so, I think about those items and it's, what's necessary for us to get into that scaled place. We've got to have skill set shifts, right? We've got to,
Right.
it's less that day to day execution of the things that I can think of when I started in the profession, and more into, intellectual curiosity and being that person who's going to be the self starter, that really wants to get into the judgment business, helping to orchestrate and collaborate better, kind of unlocking your own learning and upskilling and wisdom building. I kind of look at it and I get a real kick out of all the things that I can do with AI that I absolutely couldn't do yesterday without it.
Yeah.
And so it's great for me because there's a lot of things that I just lack certain skills to be able to do that it can help me be creative. It can help me learn new things. So, um, I think you mentioned it earlier with business models that, I think a top priority with the audit profession, Dennis mentioned it as well. And, I think we underestimate how much the professional services business delivery models will probably change, right? Whether, artificial intelligence and technology or offshore resources or systems level thinking, the how we shape what we do and how we get work done is going to change because the constraints are going to change. Like how we
Mhm.
deliver value to clients is going to change. And I think it's those outcomes and solutions that really matter. And so, I would say, top priorities for most firms right now are, kind of resilience in their business model.
Mm,
And, I think business model resilience means firm.
absolutely. Yeah. It's funny as you were both talking, I was thinking about, how true these statements are and how true these statements maybe would have been even a couple years ago or last year, right? Like the priorities almost remain. The details behind it, maybe we wouldn't, 10 years ago been talking about AI, but we probably would have been talking about cloud or other parts of that. And so all of those, key terms that I heard you say both, right? Trust, quality, right? And as I think about the profession, that is our currency, right? That's our why as CPAs, right? It's what we do. It's what we sell in a lot of ways. It's intangible, but trust and quality, and then think of, the talent, the skill set, the technology that we utilize to do it, and then the regulatory environment that we're all operating in as kinda like the raw materials, right? It's that framework, that, as you said, is the constraint, right? Or the, box that we play in, and it can open up new possibilities, and it can constrain things, right? So it's kind of that how of what we do and why we do it, and looking at trust as the key outcome driver, um, the thing that drives that certainty and drives those healthy capital markets. Um, it's critical, right? So the CAQ in the report, one of the quotes is the CAQ frames the audit as a critical trust mechanism, right? Especially in volatile markets, right? And so we could argue, and I think anybody would say, like, yeah, we're kind of living in some volatile markets, right? Things are always changing. Decisions that are made by a part of the government or by businesses, shift things every day. And at the same time, we're living in that environment and culture that, in a lot of ways, feels that like void of trust, right? And so, what then does earning trust look like actually in practice, right? Whereas, maybe 50 years ago it was assumed. What does it look like in practice today, Matt, from a firm execution standpoint? What are you all focused on to really earn that trust and produce that trust to the market?
So I will say that it starts with culture,
Mm,
right? For us, we would talk about it as the Crow Way. That it's a document available on our website. I think trust it's really behavioral before it becomes procedural, right? Like
yeah,
you know, in the Crow Way and the document, there's a lot of different behaviors that we outline that are used to demonstrate or kind of build trust. And we have gut checks and other different documents in there where it's like, how does this gut check feel? Like, are you doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons, right? We've got a number of behaviors in the Crow Way document that talk about how you build trust, right? It's transparency, sharing of information, having tough conversations, reliability, trust is earned, right?
yeah,
It's quality under pressure with integrity, even when things are difficult. It's interdependence. It's recognizing collective contribution, the three of us working together as teams, and then I think you move to the system, right? From if you were to go to our audit quality report, it's the system of quality management, which is aligned with the international standards, but kind of evolving for, all of the QC 1000 items. I mean, you look at that and you say, okay, well, what are the things we're doing in our system? Obviously, we have 56 internal inspections to make sure that, we're executing audits well, right?
Mm.
We would go through PCAOB inspections. 17 audits inspected last year. I think we had about a deficiency rate of about 18% with like 3 different engagements that had that. I think we work really, really hard. It takes bringing a lot of different people together, to continue to do well on that. And, I would say we also tend to track, restatement rate and, what's our non-restatement rate. So, which is 99.7% of reports don't end up getting restated. And so I think, the key execution point is even with the best system of quality management, audits are still executed with humans, right? So just because you have an ineffective system doesn't mean you don't have a really good engagement or audit or engagement performance like perfection. Just to the same, an excellent system by itself doesn't necessarily or engage an excellent engagement doesn't necessarily mean system perfection, right? And so your system of quality management helps set you up in the right position to build trust, to do the right things, to put the ball in the tee and like knock it out of the park type of stuff. Whatever analogies and things we want to use there. But it's, this is intended to be recursive, and you earn trust in a multi-year effort by identifying issues and remediating and integrating those in a continuous improvement way. And it's kind of the old adage of what gets measured gets improved. And,
Right.
I think as you try to work on these items and get better at time and be consistent and do those behaviors, you build trust.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that the culture, drives the behavior, and then you have to systemize that behavior and those checks, and balances and things. But then that goes back to drive the culture again, and it's this cycle of um, trust and doing the right thing and quality, right, and transparency in a way, like measuring the right things. I think that's a really good point, Dennis. From your perspective, what are you seeing? Is anything different than, when you were, part of the profession several years ago? Have you seen a shift in any of that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say, and I sure probably said this at the beginning. I mean, I think, something unique about the role I have here at the CAQ is I have the opportunity to work with leaders like Matt from across the public company auditing profession and really see how all of these firms are really committed to audit quality. Like, and I think, Matt describing like the Crowe culture, I think its commitments to the CAQ like this shows like Matt, you guys living your culture of belonging to the CAQ, shows the importance of audit quality. I mean, everything we do is available for free to everybody, but firms like Matt's pays for those resources to get created that
Yeah.
firms that maybe aren't a member of us get to benefit from. So I think that the profession really recognizes that kind of upping the ante. The what is the old saying? Rising tides, raise all
Raise all
ships.
boats.
And I think that
Yeah.
organizations like the CQ help to do that for the profession as a whole, thanks to folks like Matt, who are part of a lot of the work that we do. I think, what does trust mean for the profession? I think we had our institutional investor survey just got released. I think today, actually. I was gonna say yesterday, but I'm pretty sure feels like it was yesterday because so much has happened today.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure we've released it today. And two of the questions we ask in that survey, one is, to what extent do you rely on audited financial statements when making investment decisions? The result of that question was that 90% of the investors that participated in the survey rely on audited financial statements when making a decision. 30% saying they rely on them a great deal, and 60% saying they rely on them completely. So, I mean, I think that's a pretty impressive statistic. One of the other questions we asked is, how much do you trust the accuracy of audited financial statements? And the result to that question was 91% of institutional investors surveyed trust the accuracy of audited financial statements. with 54% trusting a great deal and 36% completely. So, I mean, those stats to me demonstrate kind of that this profession that has earned the trust of investors. Now, we all know trust can be lost very
Right.
quickly. And so that's why I think the things that Matt described around the culture of Crowe, those things happening across the profession are so important. Because I think it helps to maintain that confidence that investors have in the work that auditors do. I do think that maintaining that trust also means, as a profession, describing what is our value
Mm.
to the financial reporting ecosystem. I think that sometimes we can be a pretty humble profession, hesitant to kind of preach too loudly, the great work we do in the public interest. But Rebecca, to your point earlier at the start, the P in the middle of
Yeah.
CPA, we public, and so what drives auditors is that public interest and responsibility to the investors that are ultimately paying their audit fees. I think transparency is another one. And I know a lot
Mhm.
of firms do a lot today to describe what they're doing to kind of maintain their audit quality through their different transparency and audit quality reports, which I think is great. And then I also think it's engaging. I think that the more we as a profession can engage with different stakeholders to help tell the story of the work that we're doing, the better off we're going to be as a profession. And I think organizations like the CAQ enable the profession to have that mechanism for convening all different stakeholders to talk about issues the profession is facing and how audit plays into those issues.
I love that, Dennis, and it is something that I think about, as an association leader, right? The idea of people coming together, multiple stakeholders to create a better outcome for everyone. That's my language, right? I love that and love what CAQ is doing for the audit profession, right? And bringing those stakeholders together to really level up and help each other, right? To heighten that trust, right? So if we kind of transition from, the big why, the what we do and why we do it, and we look at kind of the components, right? The how, with regulatory kind of being one of the big monsters, right? We've seen significant leadership changes at the PCAOB, significant as in like entire board, right? Um, what are you seeing, Dennis, in particular? I'll start with you here from the SEC and new PCOB leadership. What signals are you seeing that can kind of hint to maybe the future a little bit?
Sure. So as you mentioned, we did have a board transition occur. So in January, SEC Chairman Atkins announced 4 new board members. So Jim Logothetis, I think I'm saying that right, who is the chair of the board. He's a retired partner from a large accounting firm where he was the global signing partner on some pretty big
Mm,
accounts for that firm. So I think that's exciting for the profession that the chair is somebody who knows what it's like to
right.
to be regulated. I've also heard that he's really doing this for the public service to kind of give back to
Eh,
the capital markets. And so I think I'm really excited that it's somebody who sounds like is wants to make sure that audit continues to be a great profession, and the role that the regulator plays in it. The other 3 new board members: Steve Lawton, who was a former board member of Christina Ho's counsel; Mark Calabria, who has a career at OMB and government, I think, is an economist; and then Kyle Hauptman, who he's not been sworn in yet, not until his role, they find his successor where he currently is. He'll then step down and then get sworn in. So for now, we've got Jim, Steve, and Mark, and then obviously George Bodick. He was the acting chair, and he is still on the board. So we
oh,
do have one
one.
board member who is remaining, which I think is good for
Yeah.
the board as a whole. And I do think so by statute, the PCAB can only have 2 CPAs on the board,
And
and so Jim, a retired audit partner is one of those CPA seat holders, and then George Bodek, who's got a long career in being a regulator. So I think it's pretty unique that the board leadership right now has on it CPAs with experience being regulated and deep experience of being the person regulating. So I think that's good for the board as a whole.
Yeah.
Um, SEC Chair Atkins did state when he announced the new board members, I believe, that he was looking for a key priority to be a new strategic plan.
Yeah.
And he looked forward to working with the new chair and board to create a comprehensive strategic plan that gets back to basics, which doesn't
Yeah.
surprise me, right? That's a lot of what we hear Chair Atkins saying from an SEC perspective. So not surprising that maybe he's looking for a strategic plan at the PCAOB that kind of aligns with that get back to basics mentality that we hear the SEC talk about. And so I would imagine right now, I believe their strategic plan has to do with inspection, standard setting, enforcement, and kind of operational effectiveness of the PCAOB as a whole. At the end of the day, the PCAOB is a standard setter. They are, doing inspections. So I'd imagine that while maybe the strategic plan is certainly, going to change since Chair Atkins has noted that kind of he expects that. I do think that you're going to see probably priorities in those same areas. It may just be the way things are done is
Yeah.
maybe differently. So I think, it's early days, I think, in the new leadership at the PCAOB, but I think we certainly have been thinking about, where are there opportunities for improvement. I think that the profession really does recognize the importance of inspections, and we all recognize that audit quality has really improved as a result of inspections. But it's been 20 plus years since the PCAOB was formed. Matt was talking about QC 1000 and systems of quality control earlier. Those have really become much more robust and mature over the last 20 plus years. And so how could you maybe reimagine the inspection program, one that's a little bit more focused on that QC system to then, maybe do less individual engagement selections. And then also too, with QC 1000 being a newly adopted standard, that effective date was, pushed out 1 year over the summer. So it'll be effective come mid-December this year. I think there isn't the CAQ has lobbed in a comment letter asking for that extension of time. We also asked for some targeted amendments and implementation guidance. So the effective date got pushed out, but hopefully there's an opportunity for maybe this new board to put out some proposed targeted amendments to help get at some of the challenges that firms are facing where there are differences between the international standards and the PCOBs, and is there really a benefit to audit quality for some of those differences, and kind of that back to basics and making things a little bit more streamlined to help reduce costs. I think there's an opportunity there. So I know I said a lot. I'll maybe stop there.
Yeah, no, that's great overview. Yeah, and thank you for pointing out there is a one member from the old board, which I think is really, having that continuity and is important. So I'm glad that's the case. And sorry, I missed that. Matt, from what you just heard, and I know that you're super involved and chair and sit on several different committees and things like that. What are you seeing from like a practitioner standpoint that you would say, practitioners need to watch this closely for the next 12 to 18 months when you think of the regulatory environment?
Yeah, I think when we think about, what practitioners need to watch, I think obviously there's an inspection focus on, QC, QM readiness, right? Right. There's that's what I would have said that the PCOB and George Bodek, and they're very interested in understanding what are the gaps, what are the differences, like, implementation questions, all the rest of that. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, obviously the AICPA standard is live and subject to peer review this year, right? And so obviously, QM is live, and AICPA, PCOB will be focused on it as well. I think following on to that, governance, tone at the top, PCOB at the conference, the SEC December conference, AICPA, PCOB conference, made a remark, about if you've taken private equity or you're contemplating it, expect a QC focus related to that. Obviously, we talked earlier about the impacts of AI. I think this is, and that's let's be honest here. It's not just what the firm might do, the practitioner might do. It's what the preparer or the company is using, and
Absolutely.
what the impacts are there. And so, how are you staying on top of those items? Risk assessment, robustness, like the impacts of emerging items, is always going to be top. I think, with a lot of the QCQM, root cause rigor, typical engagement selections, those types of things. And then, I think as we say, okay, over the next 1 to 2 years, I'd say I expect stability. You might say, okay, stability, what does that mean? Um, Stability in standard setting, right?
Mm,
Stability in inspection, stability in markets. Like, I think Dennis used the, back to basics, some of those different types of things. And I think, FASB's got a very kind of methodical list they're working through. PCAOB's got a list of things that they've been focused on. What do we need to update and improve? AICPA International, right? So I think there will be a focus on leveraging the best domestically and internationally, and where are places we can borrow from the best thinking one another. And so, um, I guess I would just be remiss if I didn't call out for preparers. I think there's a definite potential where we could see just more implementation guidance for if you're using AI as a preparer. COSO issued a framework last week about how to think AI in an ICFR framework. Maybe the SEC or others, weigh in with some thoughts on what it means. I think, um, you know, I'll be very interested to see with this push for efficient capital formation. What are there any changes in what are necessary protections that need to be in place if we open up access to capital to more companies, more types of investors, more types of entities? Will we see independent standards modernized, codified, harmonized? I'll call it.
yeah.
There's lots of different things, but I would say these are all things that in my mind, where it's like if I was just to work through the big buckets of items that I would expect practitioners should be like looking for the next year and a half.
Yeah. I loved the some of the positive words you use. I feel like sometimes when we think about what's going on in regulation, it's a lot of like chaos, complexity, things like that. But you use the word stability, and stability doesn't mean boring or same as last year. But it means that back to the basics, and I think that that's encouraging, right? As we think of standard setting and really that looking for what is best practice out there. And that leads us right to, you led us into the AI conversation, right? Like, in the CAQ notes that, it's not no longer whether we should use or are using AI in the audit process, but it's like, how is it being deployed responsibly? You mentioned, the COSO framework. Anything you would kind of double click or drill down on that, Matt, of what you're seeing in particular to AI and kind of how we're using it
Yeah.
responsibly.
I mean, again, I think there's two things to focus on. Where are we seeing companies use it? And, what are we seeing with firm application? Right.
Mhm.
And then what are the implications there? So if I was to walk through it from like a Crowe execution standpoint, you could look in our audit quality report. You will see, our audit platform, which is called Insight, our Ignite AI and analytics platform, our Clarity Chat, our secure exchange tools, like all of our technology tools. I think most are looking at what are the things that are best to couldn't use or leverage AI, or quite honestly, any other technology too,
Right.
right? And I mean, to some extent, we've been using AI for a really long time. Like, let's be careful how we generalize or define those things. But I think AI policy, when I think about it from a firm, starts with good governance, starts with a methodology for thinking about, well, how do we think about if a company is using it? How do we identify how they're using it, the risks, the impacts on the financial statements, and what we need to do related to that? If we're, as an audit firm, using it certain ways, what does that mean that we need to do? And so, obviously, thinking about privacy, thinking about reliability, transparency, human oversight, human in the loop. And so I think, I tell people internally at Crow, when you implement or put IT or technology into um, an older process, it reshapes risk. It
Uh,
doesn't just automate it. And so introducing AI into legacy processes changes the error profile. It changes how you should design controls. It changes your review expectations. Like, I'm not looking at it with a review of like, well, what are the types of errors that my staff person might have had? Now I'm trying to look at it to go, well, what are the types of errors that, AI might have had? And so,
Mm.
you've got to change your AI governance thinking, right? To, human in the loop is necessary, but not sufficient unless the humans are reviewing to detect AI specific risks, i.e., hallucinations, right?
Right.
And I think governance to understand kind of the new risks introduced and how to redesign controls and not just like overlay old processes, I think is really, really important. And so, that's how I think about kind of the way that we're going about it, but being very systematic about how we use it as a firm, or, how we go through when our companies are using it either operationally or in a financial reporting sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love, recently, was working on something and someone challenged the human in the loop and it shouldn't be like, and they said, shouldn't it be human in the lead? Right. And that goes to that governance, right? Aspect of it. And not, I think what the shortcut seems like it would be, okay, here's our existing process and we're just going to automate this part and this part because AI can do that part. But to your point, it really reshapes, like the risk is now different and it should really be a process built around what we're using, not just kind of like truncating these little things that we ship off to AI. Like, how do we do it holistically and make sure that we're that human in the lead or in the loop in terms of a government's process kind of standpoint, that quality management part. Anything you would add there, Dennis?
Yes, I might have to steal that one from you. Human in the lead. I like that.
I stole it from somebody else. It was anonymous though in the comments to something I was reading. So I'm like, oh, I guess I can claim it then. It was anonymous.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good
Yeah.
one. Well, so we did ask, so we had an institutional investor survey we did last year. I think this one was May. And we asked, it was a survey that was specific to auditors' use of AI.
Mhm.
And so nearly 9 in 10 investors viewed an auditor's use of AI in the audit as favorable. And when asked about the beneficial uses of AI in auditing, 64% of investors thought that the use of AI in the audit would improve the audit's accuracy and efficiency. And then 45% of them thought that it could also enhance risk assessment and prioritization. So I think it shows you that investors are expecting
Mm.
auditors to be using the technology and they see value in using it. We did ask them about their biggest concerns. And so the top concern had to do with cybersecurity and data privacy.
Privacy.
But the second biggest concern, which was only 24% of the investors, they were concerned with potentially auditors over reliance on the technology, which I don't think is all that surprising to me. I even think like myself, sometimes when I see something is like AI, I become more skeptical. So it's like you believe in the value of it, you think it can improve things, but then you're like, wait, I'm a little skeptical. But I
Yeah.
think this is the right profession, as far as you can trust an auditor is going to be skeptical
Right.
and ask questions. And
Yeah.
so I think we are well well skilled to hopefully mitigate that risk of over reliance. And I think demonstrates that professional skepticism, which is, a trait the profession's always had to have. That's going to be a trait for the future of the profession too, because these are tools that, a lot of what I hear described to us by our member firms is, these are tools that are enabling their auditors to maybe do things in a more efficient way, remove some of that manual mundane work, which is going to really free up the time for that more judgmental thinking, kind of help us hone our more interpersonal human skills of, how do you communicate what these technologies are telling you. So I think it's exciting time for the profession when you think about how AI could make this kind of an even more fascinating career.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's I'm encouraged by that 9 out of 10, I think you said. And that that their biggest thing was it would improve quality. I was waiting for the, they think it's going to decrease the price of things, because I feel like sometimes that's what people think. It's like, oh, you did it faster, so it should be cheaper, and we're like, not exactly. Like quality went up, and that professional skepticism and that idea of higher level judgment and oversight, rather than the ticking and tying and the things that we're able to use AI for. It's so critical, and it kind of goes right into, and I know Matt kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but the changing skill set, right, that we need in this changing environment. And I think particularly of students or young people entering the profession, and the skill set that's needed, that higher level um, judgment and professional skepticism that's needed earlier and earlier, right? Um, because as we move into, like, the last topic, talent, the audit remains fundamentally a people profession, right? There's a lot of numbers, of course, but we are a relationship and a people profession at its core, right? And so, Matt, I'll start with you as you think about the people component, which is, our greatest assets as a profession, our minds, our people. What is the urgency there in terms of what you're seeing in skill sets or attracting kind of the next generation to the profession?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? I mean, I hear people worried at times about the talent pipeline, and I probably would reframe that a little bit because I
Mm,
think you're right. I think the bigger issue is skill alignment
yeah,
for kind of the redesigned way that, work's going to be carried out in the future. And I guess kind of I first look at, again, just publicly available information or a quality report would say, there's about 1,400 audit professionals at Crowe. And I think, we've got, I think it's 40 some hours of annual training, um, the different people go through. And, retention metrics would say we've got pretty good stability of, people at senior levels. But, just putting on my execution hat, I would say, the system and the design of how work's getting done is changing,
right,
right? I think there's a lot of those ticking and tying execution elements that are going to get automated, right? And, or done different ways, right? If it not automated. And, I think to your point that it's once all of that's gathered, that's when, that judgment worker, that risk evaluation, that client engagement relationship, being able to have those hard conversations and things that we talked about are, that increases in importance. Like those aren't things that AI can do for you. Um, I think, obviously hybrid work impacts some of these items and, being able to develop that judgment, being able to have those hard conversations, like sometimes, those you learn those by having them. You learn,
yeah,
that some lot many times they're best to have in person. You don't send the email or the text messages to have that.
yeah,
And I think I've mentioned this earlier, but I think, AI will democratize certain technical capabilities, creativity ability increases. Like I can code, I can write music, I can do all kinds of different types of things that I couldn't do yesterday. But, the audits are done by people. We're in the judgment and risk business, right? That doesn't get automated. What
right.
changes is the work like how we get the work necessary completed and done and how we, kind of execute those judgments. And so, that's probably has how I think about the talent angle of like what we're looking at, kind of from a firm's perspective.
Absolutely. And Dennis, I know the CAQ has done phenomenal work with the Accounting Plus program, and recruiting and kind of telling the profession's story. But what are you seeing in terms of skill set or the broader kind of responsibility that we have for the profession to kind of bring up and train the next generation?
I mean, I think a lot of what Matt was saying there just resonates as far as kind of, we're in the judgment and risk business and the human element of the work that we do. I think when we, anecdotally, I feel like when we talk to audit committees about how they measure audit quality, a lot of times what they talk about is like the interaction with the audit partner. Like, how
Mm.
many times a year are they meeting with that partner? How often are they meeting with the entire, other members of the team outside of the audit partner? And so I think, that shows to me like how, part of the currency or value of this profession is those independent relationships. But being able to have hard conversations, to be able to communicate in a way where certain judgments were made, or where maybe there's a difference of opinion and a judgment that was made, or whatnot. So I do think that so much, Matt, of what you said around kind of the future of the profession and what it's going to take to be an auditor really resonated with me. I think from a CAQ perspective, certainly the Accounting Plus campaign is one that continues. I think that we're seeing a lot of good success with the campaign. I think it's really focused on two things around how brand awareness, and so how can we articulate what this profession is, what we do, and do that earlier. So trying to get
Mhm.
into high schools to tell our story, because I think that we found that a lot of times, a lot of the folks that are in the profession, they knew an accountant. And so we really need to get to those people that maybe don't know accountants, so that there's
Right.
more people that know about the future of what a career in accounting looks like, and help dispel some of those myths. And I actually think technology, and where some of the mundane, tasks that are going to be, become more automated, and, that actually probably makes the profession a little bit more attractive.
Right.
So I do think that probably at some point our messaging around the profession probably does need to change a little bit as kind of the future skill sets becomes more known. But I think
And
this is a profession that is very adaptable. I think that we're used to responding to needs in the capital markets and honing skill sets we need to kind of continue to be relevant to the work that we do.
absolutely. So I'm going to end with some like lightning round questions here, like quick 1, 2 word kind of answers. Playing on the skill set. What skill? We'll start with Matt and then go to Dennis. What skill will define the successful auditor in 2030? So dream it out a little bit. What skill set you think will define the successful auditor then?
Again, I mean, I think it's curiosity,
Mm,
right? I think it's just intellectual curiosity and kind of that self-starter. So,
absolutely. Yeah, Dennis.
I'm gonna steal that from Max. I taped a podcast earlier today, and I said skepticism, but I think skepticism and curiosity are very similar things. And I do think you're right, Matt. Like, in this environment where we have all these different tools available to us to do things we couldn't do before, let's be curious about what's coming out of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. If we can be curious, can we even not just react to capital markets, but kind of, be prepared for what's happening and we can see, the trends happening and get ready for it to be able to react faster or even, before those things happen. One priority that the profession you think could be underestimating.
Who do we go? Who's going
So
first?
we'll go with Matt first. Sorry.
I said it earlier, business model transformation,
Mm,
right? I think the old model with which how we staffed things, how we got work done, it's changing. I
yeah.
think people underestimate that. Um, and I think we're all going to learn a lot about what does that look like in the future.
Right. And how does that shape different, the regulatory environment based on that and all of those things, absolutely. Dennis.
I think there's a lot of focus on technology. Certainly firms are doing a lot to innovate. So are companies. I just worry sometimes that, and this is Dennis speaking, I just worry that, like, could the audit opinion, the pass fail model, like, at what point does technology evolve so quickly that we can look at 100% of things that, like, we could continuously be auditing, and a point in time opinion just doesn't make sense anymore. And so I think we're maybe years off from that happening, but I do think, at what point do we ask ourselves if, like, kind of is there ways to really transform what we do and how we do it with the use of technology?
I love that. That's really cool. So last question, because this is the bottom line, and because we start with good news, I want to end with good news. What is the good news about the future of audit, or what's one reason that you are optimistic about the future of audit? Matt, I'll go to you first again.
Yeah, I mean, I think trust and quality are the solution. They're
Mm.
what makes audit services valuable. Trust
Mhm.
still matters. Capital markets require independent assurance. Technology enhances, it doesn't replace judgment. I think firms willing to redesign business models will thrive. And I think that means the future of audit's not smaller. That means it's more judgment driven, it's more technology enabled, it's more human centered, and it's a future I'm pretty excited for.
I feel like that's, like, the best quote of the whole like, I feel like you just summed up, almost an hour's worth of conversation in a great quote. I love that, and it is optimistic, something to be excited about, absolutely. Um, Dennis, I'm sorry to make you go after that.
I know.
What's
I
what's
feel like I'm gonna miss it, but I'm gonna be optimistic that I won't. And will say I do love that these podcasts start out as a eternal optimist. I like the positive tone at the start and the beginning. I mean, I
Yeah.
think for me, I'm optimistic because of the people that are in this
Huge.
profession. I think I get to work with amazing leaders from across the profession every day. And I know that this is a profession that knows how to adapt and they've got the skills to do it.
Yeah. And it's definitely my favorite part of this profession is the people. There'll always be the work and the numbers and all of that stuff. It will be there, and I love a good spreadsheet and all of that, but it's the people that get me excited, absolutely, and talking to experts like yourself and leaders like yourself. Thank you, so much for joining me and talking a little bit about the future of the audit today.
Thank
Thanks for having me.
you.